Thank you. Everybody hit the got it, and we'll get started here. So the first thing, especially for some of you that may be new or watching this for the first time, we have 4 values that we work with on Young Entrepreneur Syndicate: train, coach, develop, and inspire. And so tonight I'm going to be working under the develop section of our values. And what we're looking to do here, we've asked in the past, what do you want? What do you hope to get out of each of these calls? Well, we know what we want to get out of them. So I'll share that at the beginning of this before I get started tonight. And when we're talking about develop, our goal is to help develop a growth mindset and utilize tools to get the most out of each day. Learning to tap into your instincts and rely on the necessary your soft skill sets: relationship building, decision making, and self-management. So that's what our goal is on tonight's session. So my topic under develop for tonight is twofold. You saw it on the announcement for tonight. It's being accountable and decision making. And I'm one of those, I can be really concrete, sequential in how I approach things. So of course I went through my lesson plan, and it was being accountable first and decision making came second. And afterwards, I realized that I had it backwards. So we're going to talk about decision making first and then accountability after. And I'm just going to do a real quick touch on accountability at the end of this tonight, because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking about accountability under a different topic, and it's going to be under training. And I'll have a little bit more to get started. So first, with decision making, I want to start with a quote. One of my favorites. Talk about book club. This goes way back. Louis Lamar, the Western writer. One of my favorite quotes from him is, "There will come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning." And so think about that. With every decision you make, sometimes you think that decision is going to finalize things, but it really just starts a whole new path going. And I'm going to tell a quick story first about decision making, because I was in, some of you know, I was in the military. And when I was going through officer advanced camp, where you're actually graded by cadre, and my cadre were all Vietnam veterans, lieutenant colonels and command sergeant majors, top brass that had gone through actual combat. And I went through, thank God, through but these were the people who were evaluating me on field exercises, field maneuver, leadership skills. And then you're also evaluated by all the people you go through training with. So your peers evaluate you, and then you've got experts evaluating you. And they literally give you command, and you go off and they give you a field exercise to do. And in these field exercises, it's kind of like advanced laser tag. You get to play with $1 million lasers, so everybody's suited up with, vests, and even the armor, tanks and jeeps, vehicles, helicopters, they all have a Miles laser system on them. So it's just like you're firing real bullets, but you're not. It's make pretend. But it, for the most part, is as realistic as you can get without actually hurting someone. So my first assignment was, I was supposed to go and there could have been enemies showing up. So I assigned a point man, and the point man leads the entire platoon to this objective. But he kind of went nuts on me. He took machine gun fire from a machine gun nest, mind you, a simulated nest. And instead of stopping and pulling back and asking what I wanted to do, because I could have gone around it, we could have sent out, excursion forces, etc. He started charging straight toward it, which meant the entire platoon was following him, leapfrogging straight into basically an ambush. And so, I'm leading this expedition, and so I shot my own guy. And so when it comes to evaluation time, that was the decision I made. This was a friendly fire thing. This was my soldier, right, under my command. And I shot him. And I had to answer for that to, seasoned veterans. And I said, it was the only choice I had. I said it was take him out, or the whole platoon was going to follow in and get taken out by this machine gun nest. And I said, and plus, if this wasn't the Miles system, just so you know, I said, I shot him in the leg. I didn't, it wasn't a fatal shot. And of course, the Miles system doesn't do that. But, in real life, I would have taken him down without, doing a lethal shot. So I had to answer for that decision. And there was no making excuses. There was no, well, I got nervous, I didn't know what to do. It's like I knew exactly what I needed to do in that thing. And it turns out everyone, the people that I served with, my compatriots that were also scoring me, said, oh man, I don't know what we're going to do with you. I don't know what the cadre is going to do with you. If they're going to crucify you for this decision. And lo and behold, they had to sit back and say, well, that changes how I look at things. And my whole thing, even then, and at that time I was 20 years old, and maybe 21. But I always looked at, if I had choice A or choice B, I always created alternative C. So choice A was just follow him in. Choice B was, do nothing except follow that. I mean, it's follow your orders, go through it until you're all dead. And I created alternative C. And that wasn't a bad thing. So that was one instance. And I came out actually with some respect. And that's never a bad thing. But again, it was the decision. The decision is the hard thing. And here's another quick story, just to kind of put it in perspective. Sometimes it's little stuff. That represented a life and death scenario that could possibly have happened. But at the same point in time, every morning at advance camp, we were graded on how clean our barracks were, how the bunks were made. You've probably seen the old movies, where they try and flip a quarter off of them and that sort of thing. Well, they did that. Those GI inspections, we had one every single day. And our platoon scored at the bottom. So everybody had a turn commanding that platoon and trying to get it in order. And every single day, our platoon scored the worst. And I thought, I'm pretty good about being clean and knowing what a GI inspection is. And I thought we did pretty well, but for whatever reason, we failed over and over and over for a couple of weeks. And that meant you were last in the chow line. And so when everyone else was commanding, they had their turn to command, they made everyone get up earlier, half an hour earlier to, like double GI the barracks. And then we'd still, when I turned to take command the night before, I told everyone, I said, oh, here's the deal. We end up last at breakfast all the time anyway. It doesn't matter. Tomorrow we're sleeping in. So instead of getting everyone up early, I just said, hey, whatever. This wasn't a matter of consequence to me. And so when it was my command, I made the decision that it didn't matter. It was just who gets to eat breakfast first. And the barracks was clean. From a hygiene point of view, it was more than adequate. So it wasn't a matter of consequence. And I had read the book in my first year of college, called The Little Prince. Some French guy who wrote it. I couldn't pronounce his name if I tried, but you could look it up, Google it, The Little Prince. And it literally is lessons on matters of consequence and not getting worried and inundated and stressed out over things that ultimately really don't matter. They're not important matters. And again, we of course failed our barracks inspection, but everybody felt really good about, sleeping in. They got some extra rest and still failed, so it didn't matter. And that was one of the things. I came out as a number one cadet out of that advanced camp, out of all that time. And those were a couple of the things that people looked at that said, this really made him different. It was those types of decisions that you think they might not be that big of a deal, and you make them on the fly, but they matter. And then you have to be accountable to them. So those are just a couple of quick stories to kind of put it in perspective. Decisions now, we're talking about business decisions, but we're also talking about life decisions. And final story, and then I'm gonna jump into the training, and I hope your pencils are sharp and you got some blank paper. And business partners passed away 2 weeks ago, and I saw him 6 days before he died. And we were literally talking 2-3 years into the future. And I had left work and went to work for myself with, total freedom. For those of you who have done that, you know how exhilarating and exciting it can be, not without its own stress, but there is something really special about being in command of your own time and building your own legacy. And that's what entrepreneurs do. We start several things for a payoff in the end. And I had hoped that this business partner would have left the workforce early. He had worked in construction early on, lost an eye with a nail gun. And so he switched careers and he got into professional sales. He was really good at that, did some really good investing, but he still worked. And he was due to retire in March of this year, just a few short months ago. Toward the end of February, he was diagnosed with stage 3 liver cancer. He decided to go to the Mayo Clinic. By the time he got there 2 weeks later, it was stage 4 liver cancer. And they had some special treatments they were going to try. And they really thought that they might be able to arrest it and get several years out. And then he just literally passed away a couple of weeks ago. And waiting for retirement, waiting to do it, when he thought he was going to be in a better position, never came. It never happened. And he was positioned where he could have. And we had this conversation several times. I said, why don't we branch out? We've got this one side thing. You don't need to keep doing what you're doing. You're just building somebody else's legacy. It would be, why don't we just keep branching out? So you never know. That's the moral of the story is there are bookends on our life and there are bookends on our careers. And we never know when that final one is. So let's make the most out of what's in between. And that's going to happen based on the decisions you make. So diving into decisions, 2 things. We only need 2 things, right, to make a decision. Point number 1, you need information. Point number 2, give yourself some space here. You need confidence. So under needing information, first thing, seek wise counsel. That's part of what the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate is. This syndicate, you've got a bunch of people who are with a lot of different experience and you can tap in. This is seeking wise counsel. The problem with wise counsel, though, is that you can be on an information gathering journey that never ends because you can never have all the information. And some of you know what I'm talking about here. I've worked with people. In fact, Jim, last week in your discussion, you talked about a hire that you had that was a top-notch sales professional. And when you hired him, all he did was sit in the office and plan, and he never made a sales call. And after 6 months, he lost his job. So, some people can get paralyzed with planning and preparation and information gathering. So you need to, at some point, put deadlines out there. If you're gathering information, how much information do you really need to move forward? And don't get paralyzed gathering information. Second point B, do the facts, does the information that you've gathered support a decision that lines up with or promotes your values and your company's mission? I mean, that's the biggest thing I see where people in business is they make a quick call and they make an emotional decision instead of a business decision that lines up with personal values or the company's mission statement. And so very important, if those things don't line up, that decision has to go a different direction. And that literally can be the difference between failure and success right there. So any decision has to line up with your personal values. Someone's asking you to try something funky, something that might not sound right. Again, bounce it off of an attorney, bounce it off of your accountant, your tax preparer, tax planner, your financial advisor. But it better line up legally, which should be part of your value system. If you're on this call, I certainly hope it is. But you've got to make sure it passes those 2 tests. Next, you can be incapacitated, like I said, with that information gathering. But the other part is, and this is what I've seen in my network marketing careers, what I've seen is it's a justification for procrastination. That ought to be a business term. Someone in an MBA Harvard program needs to coin that. Justified procrastination. You give yourself an excuse to justify, I'm not ready to go make that call yet. I'm not ready to go talk to that investor yet. I'm not ready to make that because I don't have my ducks in a row. Well, maybe they'll help you get them in a row. So don't use that as an inaction step. It needs to be an action step. Any decision that you're about to make before you make that final decision still needs to be leading to action, not inaction. And that's a tough one because we can all find a reason not to do something right away, can't we? It's easier if your boss or a coworker or a client says, I need this by 2:30 Friday afternoon. Man, we'll move things around, adjust schedules, and we'll get it done. But if it's something ourselves, are we doing that same kind of effort? Are we moving things around to get our stuff done, to get our decision-making mode done? And here's the thing I'm going to tell you, great leaders take action before they're 100%. When you're gathering information, all that stuff, you'll never have all of it. And you're going to have to make a decision. A good leader, a great leader, a good businessman is going to make that decision before they're 100%. And this leads me to my next point here, and that's trust your gut. And that's easy to say, right? How many here, get in the chat real quick if you would, and just put a number 1 in if you have read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, the book Blink. Just jump on the chat, put 1 in there. I want to know how many. I can't see all of your faces tonight, so I'm going to go to the chat here. If you haven't read Blink, pick it up. In fact, Jim and I think we're going to probably put that on the Y.E.S Syndicate recommended book reading list. It is something that will help you trust your gut instinct. And we all have it. That mother's intuition, father's intuition, business intuition, it's a real thing. It is a real thing. And the more you use it, the better you will get at it. Okay, so I see some of you haven't read it. This is good. This is your best tip for the night. For the book readers out there, here's your recommended reading for the night. Blink. It's that simple. Blink. And the idea here is in the blink of an eye. Without knowing. You have a natural instinct. And that's huge. When you can start relying on your gut, and it's not just your gut, you're relying on experience, you're relying on all the different input you've had your entire life, all the different clients you've had, business people, and all of that goes into your database up here. And subconsciously, your mind is already making decisions for you. And you feel it in your gut. You just know something's off or it feels right. And trusting that is a skill that I think every successful entrepreneur has that skill. Jim already has the link up there for you guys. All right. The link for Blink is up there. So trust your gut, and Blink is going to actually help you. When you read through that, you're going to say how many times you actually used it yourself. And that's going to be a great boost for you. Okay. So that's number 1. Point number 2, I said this at the very beginning, the first thing you need is information. Talked about the good part, the bad part of needing information and gathering it. Number 2 is needing confidence. This came up in our call last week, kind of, and I didn't look at my notes again, Jim, but it was kind of profound because so much of what we do and don't do is because of confidence or a lack of confidence. And I've spent more time looking at this since our call last week. It really got me thinking about how can we best help people on these calls, in the syndicate, in real life, our own family members. How can we help them with their confidence? And there are 2 roadblocks to confidence. Okay. Number 1 is limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs in your data, not trusting what you're hearing, not trusting the information you're gathering. And the biggest one is limiting belief in yourself. And I will tell you, when I was managing employees, that here's a real cool thing. LM equals LS, low self-esteem equals friction and trouble. And I read that in a book about sociology, psychology, I don't know, 30 some 40 years ago. And it was absolutely true. Whenever there was friction and trouble in your organization, you had employees that weren't getting along, something, it always could be back down to someone had low self-esteem. Someone's feelings got hurt. Someone didn't feel like they were being treated fairly. And that's a confidence drainer. Anytime you've got low self-esteem, it's going to drain your confidence. So you need to just start trusting yourself, believing in yourself, trusting your gut, believing that you've got the information and the street cred to make the decisions that you need to make. So that's number one roadblock to confidence. Two roadblock is fear. And it's funny, I was getting my notes ready for this lesson, and I follow Les Brown. I hope several of you do, on Instagram, Twitter. And Les Brown had one of his quotes up there just a couple of days ago. He said, "Too many of us are not living our dreams because we are living our fears." And you talk about entrepreneurs. How many people out there do you think have good ideas, great ideas? Well, why aren't they acting on them? Fear of the unknown, fear that they're not good enough, fear that they'll fail. You know, everybody has fears, but we're not here to live our fears. We're here to live our dreams. We're here to, more importantly, live our purpose. And I guarantee you, if you're on this call, your purpose is not to live in fear. Okay? That's going to hear it from us over and over again. But too many of us are not living our dreams because we're living our fears. And it just hit home. You have to break out of that. So here are some tools to push through. All right. How do you push through your limiting beliefs or your fears? Number one, know where you're going and be convicted about it. Set your goal and keep your eyes off of it. Okay. Know where you're headed, be convicted about it. Number two, comfortable with who you are. Jim and I have said this before. In another business, we actually help people in elected office who are campaigning, and the biggest thing we tell them is just be authentic, just be yourself. You know, you're going to gain respect. You're going to be powerful, authentic. And we've talked about that before. We'll talk about it again, but just be comfortable with who you are. You're good enough. You've got all the skills. If you've got the great idea, you've already got all the skills. You just need to start pulling it all together. Number three, don't be afraid to be embarrassed. And this is easy to do in your own industry, right? You can make mistakes in an area that you're comfortable with. You know, we get comfortable, you know, making mistakes in the work that we do, but we're never comfortable when we're outside of that area. And Jim and I talked about this just last week. People get in their silos, you know, their industry silos. You know, and it doesn't matter if it's real estate. You know, the real estate people go to the real estate conventions and they get all pumped up by other realtors, you know, and brokers and people in that industry. And they're comfortable working with the title closers and the banks and the lenders. You get in a group of politicians and all of a sudden, you know, they freeze up, they clam up. And it's just like, unless they're talking about their own industry, they just fizzle. And you need to get outside of those comfort zones, and don't be afraid to embarrass yourself and say, heck, I don't know anything about that. What can you tell me? You know, we talked about this with leading questions, you know, open-ended questions before. This is going to put you on better footing. So put yourself in uncomfortable situations and don't be afraid of being embarrassed. And the way I look at this, and I've heard it said many, many times, I wrote it down for years: get comfortable being uncomfortable. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You talk about a paradox, right? You can practice it. Find avenues, find groups to get into that are outside of your silo. And that's where things, speaking groups, taking classes at a community college, getting involved in civic organizations. There are all kinds of ways to put yourself out there, meet new people outside of your silo. Very important to make those connections and you learn a lot from. Next point, recognize repeating patterns of your behavior, confront them, and move past them. We all know what our weaknesses are, and I always tell people, work on your strengths. Your strengths are what you have. And that's the primary focus, but never, ever stop pushing in on becoming better on areas where you know you're weak. I know one of mine is remembering names. I've been watching Jim Quick this week. He's given more tips on how to improve that short-term memory with names. And I as much as I try those different techniques and say their name 3 times and move on, I'm still a disaster. Until I build a relationship with someone. I used to say it even in when I was employed. We'd work with people and they'd say, well, what's that guy's name? I'd say, I don't know. I don't memorize anyone's names until they've been here 3 months. I want to make sure they're going to last before I remember their name. And that was an excuse to not get to know them and find a way to remember their name. So, I'm as guilty as the next person there. I'm a firm believer when you have a big event, everyone should wear a name tag. But when you're in a spot where they don't, we have to push in and push on. That's my weakness, and it is something that I contend with on a regular basis. So that's why I like seeing you here. I like seeing, Rachel, I've met you personally, so I don't mind that you're not on video. And again, if you think Jim and I had this conversation also. We were on a Zoom call last week, and the guest speaker was looking at all the people on Zoom, and she was commenting on what was going on in the backgrounds and how real it made them. Kids in the background and dogs, and you just came home from work. It's okay to be real. Don't be embarrassed. There's nothing to hide, and that way maybe I can look at faces and get who you are now. I can identify you, and if I saw you on the street or you up at the airport, I wouldn't have to hold a sign up that said, "Hey, Palin, here's your ride." So find things that are going to make you more comfortable with that. Next point here. So recognize your own repeating patterns of behavior, confront them. Moving past them means doing something about it. Next is conviction leads to commitment, and commitment always leads to action. It's not enough to have ideas. It's not enough to put them on paper. You still have to take real action, more action, okay? So be convicted. Talked about that first. Know where you're going, be convicted about it. Conviction leads to commitment. You got to be committed to it, and then you've got to act on it. Conviction, commitment, action. Sounds like a Hollywood thing right there. Here's something that always helps me. This is the next point. Prove others wrong. I think Dale Carnegie talks about this in laying down a challenge. And real quick story here. I've got a little bit of time. I'm about ready to wrap up. I was a smoker for years, and I quit once for a year, had a cigarette to celebrate, and I was a pack-a-day smoker again. Then I quit for 10 years, had a stressful period, started smoking again. And some of the people, I worked with a bunch of people, most of them were smokers, and I said, January 1st, they passed this new tobacco tax. They're adding another $1 to the cigarettes. I refused to do it. I'm going to quit smoking January 1st. And I found out there was an office pool on how long I would make it before I started smoking again. And I found out about that in October, and I quit. So I quit 2 months ahead of schedule just to prove them wrong. And, it's a good thing to quit anyway, but I didn't mind proving other people wrong. That was my impetus to quit smoking. It wasn't for my health. It wasn't for my family, because I was a closet smoker. No one knew I smoked. I'd go out back. I was a cheater like that, right? So I did have standards. I wouldn't smoke in public where people could see me. But And if there are any smokers out there, I'm not bashing you. I'm just saying, I'll help you quit if you want. Call me. But it was to prove others wrong. Whatever it takes to get you over that hump of being uncomfortable, find what it is. Next, give proper weight to feedback. As a parent of adult children, one of the things that my wife and I always practiced with our kids was this: once they were adults, we never gave them advice unless they asked for it. And we had heard some landers or something. Advice unasked for is criticism. So that's number one. You have to ask for advice, but then be prepared to take it. But you have to give the proper weight to feedback. If you've not asked for that feedback, it comes in the form of criticism. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but how you take it in is going to be different. So ask for criticism, ask for feedback, but then take proper weight. If you know you're right and you just maybe want to tweak something a little bit, see how it's falling on other people. You know, Rachel, I know you're in marketing. You want feedback all the time from people. So you're probably always wanting, what's your feedback? What do you think about this? How does this make you feel? But
Absolutely.
again,
100%.
absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to make that final decision. That's what clients are paying for. You can get that feedback, but it's up to you how it resonates with you. So those are the kind of neat things we can do to give us more of that empowerment where we feel good about the decisions we make. You're a professional, trust your instincts and go for it. And the next thing, count coup. What do I mean by that? Look at your successes in everything. Again, these are your tools to push through your limiting beliefs and fear. Look back at your successes and everything. I don't care if you think the last success you had was you were a top Girl Scout cookie salesperson, or you got an award in Cub Scouts. If that was the last time somebody gave you some sort of acknowledgement for a job well done, man, put it on your wall and hang on to it and say, hey, that was the start of my career. Jim, the first time you sold a stick of gum on the playground and made a profit, that's where it starts. That's as important as that first dollar bill you get from the Chamber of Commerce, your first dollar of profit, right? I've got most of my awards and stuff in a binder because I thought it was pretentious to have them all over the wall. But I do have certificates of appreciation on the wall, and I have a Community Lifesaver Award on the wall. Those are what are important to me. It's my service to others. Those are reminders of what I do. So, find what it is that makes you happy, that you're proud of, things that you've done. And it might be a diploma. If going through college, getting a degree or a technical, a merit award, I don't care what it is. If it's something that makes you feel good when you look at it, put it someplace where it's a reminder to you. Count coup. Those are those little victories that add up. All those little victories are just building on your future success. And it's important to keep those in front of you. I actually have an idea. I'll talk to Jim about it. We'll come up with this. It'll be one of our other little gifts to the syndicate members down the road. But just daily affirmations about who you are, what you aspire to be, are so important, because what goes in is what you're going to believe and what's going to come out, both in your speech and in your actions. So daily affirmations are important as well. Remind yourself how special you are, remind yourself the qualities that you bring to the table that other people don't have. Remind yourself that you're just getting started. Remind yourself how great things are going to be when you round that next corner, when you get that next client, when you find that next opportunity to expand your current business, when you find that next person that's going to notch you up to the next level. So just keep those things in front of you. So I'm going to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes. I promised you we're going to talk about being accountable and decision making. That's all under the decision making thing. Now, right? So my favorite quote right here, this is from General Clark, no surprise, military, right? When things go wrong in your command, start searching for the reason in increasingly large circles around your own 2 feet. You need to be accountable, right? I follow, if any of you have read my book or gotten this part in my book, The Warpath Alliance, I follow the AAA: acknowledge the facts, accept responsibility. That means no excuses, no blaming. And 3, apologize. Make amends if required. Now, if you acknowledge the facts and you accept responsibility, sometimes an apology isn't necessary. I told you the story of what I did when I was in advanced camp. I shot a guy, right? Be careful when people are listening back. I didn't really shoot him. A simulated shooting, okay? But I didn't, my AAA there was not apologize. I advocated for my position. So that could be apologize or advocate. Be willing to do whatever is right. If you need to apologize, do it. Be the first one to do it, and do it quickly and do it sincerely. But if you made that decision and you would make that same decision again, advocate for why you made that decision. You can acknowledge that somebody wasn't happy with it, but you need to be your own best advocate. You need to trust your decision making at the end of the day. That's part of being accountable. Be accountable to what you really believe. So I don't like it when people just say, yeah, you need to just fess up and get beyond it. I mean, do it, take a real hard look at it and advocate for yourself. And I always end with a tip. So here's the tip. Selfless decisions seldom disappoint. And selfish decisions do disappoint. Be selfless when you're making decisions. That's the tip of the day. All right, I'm going to open it up for any questions, thoughts, suggestions, anything going on in your business that may or may not pertain to anything we've discussed tonight. You can raise your hand. If you've got video on, you can do it like this, or you can go right down into the reactions and raise your hand down there, and we'll unmute you, and love to hear your feedback.
Hey, Rod, while they're pulling it together, you said something about don't get paralyzed. And it just reminds me, you know, we're here in Montana. I know not everybody is, but buffalo, they're amazing creatures, right? Not just in how they look and how they behave and how big they are and strong and bold. And right now, if you're on Instagram, you see all these idiots in Yellowstone Park trying to pet them, or, you know, drive their car over to them and they're getting mauled up. The thing about buffalo is they make the right decisions, and they don't make the easy decisions. If you really think about the creature, they put in the hard work up front. Now, we've got heavy rains here in Montana. If you've seen in the news, it's flooding, and we've got a flood watch here in our area. When a buffalo knows the storm is coming, they walk into the storm, not away from it. They know that by doing that, the storm will pass over them more quickly. And then they don't, you know, they're not avoiding the discomfort of the storm. They're walking into it. They embrace it, and they know that it'll pass them faster so that they can get beyond it. So it's kind of like this business thing. Don't get paralyzed in your decisions, right, Rod? I mean, it was a great point. Yep. Embrace what you're doing, go for it, walk through it, and come out the other side. It might not always be easy. It might be the storm we're dealing with here. But on the other side of it, the other side of discomfort comes success, or at least the answers you might be looking for if you thought maybe you're making the right or the wrong decision. So really good point about not getting paralyzed.
Thanks, Jim. And also thanks for throwing up at Les Brown and at Jim Quick, both great people to follow. I'm telling you, it's more of that, what goes in, GIGO, right? What goes in goes out. Surround yourself with some of the positive speaking and tips that they have.
I found a Les Brown quote, by the way. And, you know, I've always listened to motivational speakers, and that's really what Les Brown is. And if you don't know his story, I would highly recommend that you go to Ed Mylett's podcast, Ed Mylett, Mylett. Go to his podcast. He interviewed Les Brown last year because that was his dream mentor, right? And you know, he's got an incredible story, and the way that he tells on that show is wonderful. But the quote I pulled up real quick from Les Brown, I love this. It's appropriate for today. most people fail in life not because they aim too high and miss, but because they aim too low and hit. And I think the point is with that is that, we talk about having goals in life and not getting paralyzed and shooting for something significant. Oftentimes when you put that out there, what you believe is what you achieve, that's my motto. You're going to nail it. You write those goals down, you're going to nail it. So don't be afraid to aim a little bit higher than what you might. I'm giving y'all time for questions. I could talk the rest of the time here.
Anybody else out there? Take away from this? Don't be bashful. We're not going to keep you on here if you've got what you needed out of tonight's call and you don't have it. And again, it doesn't have to have anything to do with what we talked about tonight. You got a question about your business, bad staff, bad employees.
Okay,
talk about
I have two things I want to bring up that are not directly related to what you were talking about. I guess I would throw them more in the housekeeping category, but this is, I've got two questions for everybody that occurred to me as I was thinking about this. One is, who would like to have this reoccurring Monday evening calendar invite sent to them from, like, automatically put on your calendar reoccurring for every Monday night? Either raise your hand, yes, in the chat if you would like the calendar
I do.
invite sent. Yeah. All right. So in addition to the email reminders, we're going to send a calendar invite, so it'll be there as a reoccurring placeholder, and the Zoom link will be in it. The second thing is, I don't know if you guys have logged in recently to your member portals, but there is a new page with a directory of members that's being built. And I wanted to ask if you guys would like to put your contact information there. So some people have already said that they're okay with putting their contact information in the name of their company, maybe a link to their website, and just sort of continue to give me like yes and thumbs up on that. We're going to send a note about it, but I figure since I have you all here, I'm going to ask anyways. And if you have that page, you'll see it's growing all the time. So these are good people to network, good people to connect with. Not everybody can make these meetings, but it's just another way to have this community work together. So, you guys, the book recommendations from tonight are spectacular. I'll make sure that those get added onto our reference library, which is also growing all the time. And if you guys have read a book or heard of a book that you think is, worthwhile, share it with us, and we'll definitely check it out.
Thanks, Rachel. Really good point also, and thank you for your work on the back end. The website is something that Jim and I are very, very proud of, and that's in your hands and on you. So again, appreciate that. But secondly, for those on the call tonight and those watching, get into the back end and look at some of those documents that we've got back there for you, and we're adding to those as well. And that's going to continue to grow. There are resources back there that if you're having trouble getting inspired, or you just are bored one afternoon and you don't want to just waste time scrolling terrible social media, jump into the back end of the Syndicate and pull up some good stuff. It's all there for you. Thanks again, Rachel.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I want to touch on Rachel real fast too. Some of you, at least half of you on this call, know that I've had a relationship with Rachel, working with her together in marketing probably the last 15 years. Feels like a lifetime because we've done so much great work. It's not by mistake that Rod and I asked her to get on board with this syndicate. She brings value to the table. She's terrific at her job. Some of you, again, in this group itself, has used her services, and I continue to refer Rachel. And it's my hope and desire that this group itself works together in the future. That's why we built out the directory. There's other groups out there like Arte that I'm a member of, and Lion's Den that I'm a member of, that have different types of directories, but they're not as forthcoming as working with one another and leveraging each other's assets. Now, be professional about it. Don't bug each other to buy your product, but let it be known what you do and how you do it. So the better you can build out your directory info stuff, the better you will become a resource to others. And, right now I'll vouch for everybody in this group. You stand for a certain standard, not just because you're in the group, but because of the work that you've done. So I hope that you take advantage of that directory. I hope that you build relationships with one another, just like I have with Raquel and Rachel and everybody else that's in the group, because of who you are and what you stand for. So again, Rachel, thanks for building that out and doing a terrific job on our website and keeping the information coming. You're going to see new things added. We're constantly working on the back end on some new ideas that we can roll out, and we don't want to roll it out too fast because then it'd be hard to catch up with being a new member and then catching up to what we're adding to it. But we've got a lot of really great ideas to help bring value to you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, well, I'm a big believer when you start working with people that it's like a, crawl, walk, run approach, and I remember the very first time that you and I met, it was through a colleague. And I mean, if you would have told me then that we'd be working together all these years later, I mean, I would have never guessed it. So you just never know, as like you continue to work together and you build trust and you build experience together. And, that could definitely happen with any of us in this group. So continue to invite your friends, and Alberto's on there too. We've all worked with, Jim, and I've worked with Alberto a bunch too. So, and Alberto, my God, you keep building more and more businesses too. I love it.
He's hard to keep up with. If there's no question,
I feel like every time I talk to Alberto, he's like, "Oh yeah, I got a printing company. Oh, I got a, it's like, oh my God, another new business. Wow."
All right. One more thing on that, and then I'm going to jump into Brendan real quick here. Remember, even with our directory, the more we know about you, remember there's 7 degrees of separation out there. So we may have people that can help, that we can connect with you. Might not be somebody right here in the syndicate, but we may know somebody else in our professional can do something else. And Brendan, can you still hear me? I see you walked away from your desk. Okay, good. So I want to respond to your note here. Said it's given you some things to think about with the AAA. Acknowledge, accept. Do you have a question about that?
No,
or
I've just never never heard it like that before, Rod. And just the idea of sometimes you got to advocate for decisions you've made was something I've never actually heard it said that way. So just giving me a lot to think about around how I approach different things in life and business.
Cool. Well, because that resonated with you, I will tell you that will set you apart too. It's one thing, it's easy to roll over, right? And sometimes that's not what you need to do. It's not best for you. It's not best for your business. You'll know when you need to advocate, but I think it's important to teach strong leaders, strong business leaders, strong entrepreneurs, that you have to be an advocate. If you're not going to advocate for yourself, who will? So good. I'm glad you're thinking about it. All right. Anybody else? I don't want to cut it short, but I want to be respectful of all your time as well.
I just want to say I'm happy to be a part of this group. I know I'm kind of quiet today and I missed a couple classes, but yeah, I'm just happy to be here and already learned a lot. So a lot to think about. And accountability. Sometimes I procrastinate. That's why last week I feel bad I missed it, but I wasn't feeling good, right? An excuse, but I did watch the repeat. And so hopefully this will help me, kind of stay on my path forward with my career and my work and everything. And eventually I will have questions.
Cool. Well, Raquel, thanks. It's nice to actually see you. I think there's nobody here who's going to beat you up. If you've got reasons, not excuses. Sure. Excuses we know what an excuse is, but if it's a legitimate reason, we all have life that happens to us. So never feel bad. Don't be ashamed. Be here when you can, and you will not only benefit, but you will benefit someone else. You know, there's an accountability amongst the group here. You know, we all learn from each other. We network with each other. It's not the Rod and Jim and Rachel show. This is all of us. This is the syndicate. This is what gives us our power. So with that, anybody else? Final call.
Rod, I'll introduce next week's call if nobody else got a question. All right. So next week, the topic is confidence, the engine to keep you moving. All right. So you're fortunate because you're on the call. If you listen to this before next week, you'll know the homework. Here's what I say to you. Whatever goals you have right now, scratch them and throw them away. Rewrite them and make them bigger. I guarantee you, you're not thinking big enough right now. Aim higher, just like what Les Brown said in that quote. I'm sure that's why it resonated with me because I'd written this down about next week. I want you to dream big. Okay, dream big, and we're going to build the confidence to do that. And what's interesting is that I've mentioned it last couple of weeks when I was on the calls that I'm rereading Think and Grow Rich for the 10th time again. And it talks about visualization. Now, 4 years ago, I visualized my property here in Montana, having these animals, raising my girls up here. Alberto, you've been to my place. Rachel's been to my place. Rod's been over here every week. Come get your eggs, Rod. But you know what's interesting about that is I visualized that and here I am living it. But what I've realized recently is that I stopped visualizing that next step. I let my guard down. I'm like, oh, I'm living on Easy Street. I've got what I asked for. Well, guess what? It's time to ask for something bigger now. Okay. So your homework next week, scratch your goals, rewrite them, aim bigger. And we're going to talk about the confidence to do that. So I'm looking forward to next week.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great week. Finish strong.
Bye.
Bye.